What if the place you call home is actually a cage? What if the faces you see every day are strangers and the whispers you hear are your own? Imagine moving into your dream house only for your family to unravel, turning on each other, haunted by things that aren't there. Or are they? This isn't just a ghost story. It's a chilling psychological breakdown that ends with a twist so mind-bending it will change how you see reality forever. Get ready, because the truth about the Miller house will leave you breathless. David was a man burdened by unspoken promises. His new job was demanding, the finances tight, but he bought the Miller house, a fresh start, he told his wife Sarah, and their kids Emily, a quiet teenager, and Alex, a boisterous 10-year-old. The house, an old Victorian with peeling paint and creaking floors, was supposed to be their sanctuary, a place where David could finally prove he was a good provider, a strong father. He needed this house to be perfect. So when Emily complained about a sudden, inexplicable coldness in her room at night, even with the heater on full blast, or when Alex mentioned seeing a blurry figure peeking from behind the curtains in the attic window, David dismissed it. Just the old house settling, he'd say, his voice a little too firm, a little too dismissive. Sarah, however, felt it too. The faint, sweet smell of lavender that sometimes permeated the air, though no flowers bloomed nearby. Her favorite teacup, inexplicably found shattered on the floor, no one owning up. David was working himself ragged, constantly irritable, his jaw clenched even when he smiled. He'd snap at Sarah for trivial things, then immediately apologize. His eyes filled with a desperate, unspoken fear of failure. He saw his family as his responsibility, his to protect, his to control. He couldn't afford for anything to go wrong, especially not this house, this dream. So when strange things started happening, he fought them, not with fear, but with a grim, unwavering denial. One evening, Sarah found David in the living room, staring intently at the antique grandfather clock that stood sentinel in the corner. Its pendulum swung with an eerie, irregular rhythm. "David, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice soft. He didn't answer, just kept staring, his eyes wide and unblinking. The air around him was unnaturally cold, and a faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to emanate from the clock itself. "Don't tell him." Sarah froze, her heart pounding. She heard a faint, distressed whimper, like a child crying, coming from the upper floor. She wanted to run, to scream, but David's fixed gaze, his rigid posture, held her captive. But what happened next changed everything. The house became a battleground for their sanity. David grew increasingly authoritarian, obsessed with maintaining order. He'd demand silent dinners, inspect their rooms for any misplaced items, and rage if anyone suggested something was wrong with the house. Sarah tried to reason with him, but he'd lash out, accusing her of undermining his authority, of being hysterical. Emily, already introverted, retreated further, spending hours drawing disturbing images of shadowy figures watching her sleep. Alex, the playful one, became unnaturally quiet, talking to invisible friends, whispering secrets David couldn't decipher. The paranormal phenomena intensified, mirroring their escalating internal conflict. David's precious antique pocket watch, a family heirloom, would stop inexplicably at the exact same time every day, 3:17 a.m. Sarah's cherished gardening tools would be found bent and broken, scattered across the lawn. Emily's closet door would swing open and shut on its own, a chilling lullaby sometimes drifting from inside. David, witnessing these events, became convinced the house was actively trying to destroy his family, to break him. He refused to leave, convinced that staying meant fighting and leaving meant surrender. He wasn't about to lose. One harrowing afternoon, David found Alex attempting to crawl into the fireplace, muttering about a warm light and friends waiting. David pulled him back, terrified. But Alex fought him with an unnatural strength, his eyes glazed over. As David wrestled his son, the portrait of a stern, old man on the wall above them seemed to frown, its eyes following their struggle. David felt a rush of cold air, followed by a faint, desperate plea, "Let us rest." He shook it off, attributing it to his own rising panic. He had to protect his family. He had to fight. The truth was far more terrifying. David's grip on reality began to slip, intertwining with the house's apparent haunting. He started seeing the shadowy figures too. A gaunt man who resembled the portrait, a woman with kind, sad eyes, and two children, a girl and a boy, who mirrored Emily and Alex. He believed they were the spirits of the former residents, trying to drive his family out. He grew furious, confronting empty rooms, yelling at unseen presences, his voice raw with exhaustion and fear. Sarah and the children watched him with growing alarm, their own experiences with the supernatural now blending with David's terrifying descent. They questioned if he was the one haunted. The family started experiencing bizarre, shared visions. They'd be together in the living room, and suddenly the room would shift. The furniture would change, the walls would darken, and they'd see themselves, yet not themselves, sitting there having an argument about David's overbearing nature, about Sarah's increasing fragility. These flashes would last only moments, leaving them disoriented and questioning their own sanity. Who was real? What was happening? One evening, as David sat alone in the dim light of the kitchen, trying to plan his next move against the perceived spirits, the radio, which hadn't worked in years, crackled to life. A news report, distorted and old, spoke of a tragic fire that had consumed the Miller house decades ago. A family, the Millers, perished in the blaze. David felt a chill. Then, the report continued, detailing how the fire was caused by faulty wiring igniting in the middle of the night, trapping them all. David's blood ran cold. He recognized the names, the voices. But then the report shifted, and a new, more recent news anchor began to speak, his voice gravely. A local family, the Petersons, David, Sarah, Emily, and Alex, found deceased in their new home, the old Miller house, victims of an accidental carbon monoxide leak. The radio fizzled into static. David stared at the silent device, his heart hammering. He was 50% mystic, 50% questionable. It couldn't be real, could it? David's mind snapped. The news report, the whispers, the visions, it was all too much. He gathered his family in the living room, his eyes wild with terror and a desperate need for control. "They're trying to confuse us," he yelled, pointing at the empty corners of the room. "They want us to believe things that aren't true." He grabbed an antique iron poker from the fireplace, his grip white-knuckled. "We have to fight them. We have to show them this is our home." Sarah, Emily, and Alex cowered, not from the unseen, but but from David's unhinged fury. They were terrified of him. As David screamed, swinging the poker at thin air, the spectral figures of the original Miller family materialized in the room. They weren't aggressive, they were sorrowful, their forms translucent and shimmering. The Miller father extended a spectral hand toward David, his face filled with an agonizing plea. "David, no!" he seemed to mouth, though no sound came. David, blinded by his own denial, saw only enemies. He lunged forward, the poker passing through the Miller father's form, his momentum carrying him into the wall. He crumpled to the floor, gasping. It was then that the Miller family truly intervened, not with violence, but with a profound, undeniable truth. They surrounded David's family, their ethereal forms glowing faintly, and as they did, a wave of memories, clear and undeniable, washed over David, Sarah, Emily, and Alex. They saw it all: the moving day, the excitement, the accidental carbon monoxide leak from the old furnace in the basement, unnoticed during a cold night, the slow, insidious creep of the odorless gas, their own confusion, their arguments about David's control, Sarah's worry, Emily's retreat, Alex's new friends. It wasn't the Millers haunting them, it was them. They had been seeing themselves trapped in a loop of denial since the moment they died, days, perhaps weeks ago. The spirits they saw, the other family, were actually the Miller family, who had been there all along, silently trying to show them the truth, trying to make them understand their own demise. The true haunting wasn't by another family, but by their own denial. And David's control, his rage, his insistence on fighting the unseen was his desperate final attempt to cling to a life that had already slipped away. The truth was the ultimate shatter in justice. The poker dropped from David's hand, clattering loudly on the hardwood floor. He looked at Sarah, at Emily, at Alex. Their faces, once filled with terror and confusion, now held a dawning, heartbreaking understanding, not just of the Miller family's tragedy, but of their own. We're the ghosts," David whispered, the words heavy with a peace he hadn't felt since they moved in. Sarah reached out, her hand passing through his, a silent acknowledgement. They were finally free from the illusion, from the denial that had bound them to their earthly turmoil. The Miller family, the original spirits of the house, now stood beside them, no longer menacing, but with gentle, sorrowful expressions. They weren't antagonists, they were fellow residents, guiding them toward acceptance. The Miller house was not just haunted by one family, but by layers of time, by echoes of joy and sorrow, hope and despair. David's family, now part of its ethereal fabric, found a different kind of home, not in the land of the living, but in the quiet, reflective presence of those who came before and those who would inevitably follow. The house, once a symbol of David's ambition, now stood as a monument to a shared tragedy, a place where denial had been shattered and a terrifying truth had been revealed. The Peterson family wasn't just haunting the house. They were the house, an eternal echo of lives abruptly ended. They were no longer trying to protect themselves from ghosts. They had become the ghosts. And that's when they realized their story wasn't over. It was just beginning, transformed into an eternal whisper within the walls. This house had more secrets to tell and more souls waiting to be heard. Because sometimes the most terrifying truth isn't what's lurking in the shadows, but what you refuse to see about yourself. The Miller house stands, a silent keeper of tales, waiting for the next family to arrive, only to discover they were never truly alone. This is only the beginning. The Miller house stands, forever waiting. A new family, full of dreams and blind to its tragic past, will soon cross its threshold. But the Petersons, now silent sentinels, are ready to ensure they understand the true weight of this home's sorrow. Will these new occupants grasp the spectral truth? Or will the house simply claim them too, trapping them in its endless echo? Because in these walls, the spiritual world isn't just a belief. It's a chilling, undeniable reality, eager to be heard. And here, the living might come and go, but the truly haunted, they remain, forever watchful.